Welcome to Hey Jude, What's Cooking and Brookline Access Television. Today is going to be a continuation of the first part, which was scallion pancakes. This is a continuation of appetizers that are quick and easy, and everyone can make them at home. What I've got assembled is some chopped cabbage. I'm going to chop a little more so I can give you a demonstration. Sliced half an onion, some sliced mushrooms, some rice vermicelli noodles that I've just soaked in boiling water, which you see over here. These are the rice vermicelli noodles that have not been soaked, and it's about half a package. We have some salt. I have minced ginger as well as minced garlic. I have about 2 tablespoons of hoisin sauce, and I also have 1 jalapeno that's finely minced. And I did take most of the seeds out, but if you like it spicy, leave the seeds in. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this half a cabbage. Basically, you have the center core that you always want to cut out of the cabbage. So we're just going to take that right out. And then because the cabbage grows in layers and strips, it's really easy to shred the cabbage. So all you're going to do is go ahead and just cut it as it's in any direction, actually, that will shred it in very, very thin strips. So I'm going to go ahead, do that, and just break it up a little bit. And the reason I'm doing this, the shredded cabbage, is because cabbage is so incredibly healthy for you. It's inexpensive, and we usually find cabbage in egg rolls, whether they're spring rolls or just regular Chinese-style egg rolls. I decided to do a Thai-style egg roll rather than a Chinese egg roll, and the difference is that we use more of the rice vermicelli noodles, but we also use something called a Thai spring roll wrapper, which is very, very different than the egg roll wrapper. It's a little bit more like phyllo dough, and it tends to be very, very flaky and extremely thin, actually transparent. So you get really, instead of the chewy egg roll that you're used to, that's really pasta dough that's fried, in this case, it's more of a phyllo dough or a very, very thin dough that's super crispy. Let me give you a demo of that. That is right here. And basically, it's called Thai spring roll pastry. These are also the same rolls that are made to make lumpia rolls, which are the Filipino style egg roll. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and soak my rice noodles. I have boiling water here. It doesn't need to continue to boil. Bring it to a boil, put your noodles in, and just let them soak for about 10 to 15 minutes until they're soft. And you can always test them by eating a noodle. The next thing I'm going to do is start my stir fry. And in this case, we're going to use a wok. I'm going to move this out of the way because it doesn't have to be here anymore. I can just soak the noodles. And I'm going to turn my wok on high, add a little bit of oil, and start with my aromatics. So I've just got a little veg oil here. I'm going to put a little bit on the bottom. So I coat the bottom, not too much. Now, if you are worried about calories or oil, this is about, it's not even a tablespoon. But if you are concerned, you can use less oil and then continually add water to steam your vegetables as opposed to adding more oil. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Take a little extra water to the side. And when I talk about my aromatics, I'm talking about things that give a lot of aroma, a lot of flavor. So we're talking about our ginger and our garlic. We're talking about our chilies, in this case jalapeno chili. And we're also talking about our onions. So we're going to go ahead and saute those first. And then we're going to basically use the sides, the edge of this wok to move things up and then continue cooking the rest of the stuff. We also want to make sure we season our veg, so we're always going to use salt. And the last thing I'm going to do actually is put a little hoisin paste in just to give it a little extra flavor. How do I know this is hot enough? A couple things. One, I can look for the ripples that I think are very barely noticeable on the surface. I'm not sure if the camera can pick this up, but they're very tiny, tiny little indentations. It almost looks like it's raining on the surface of this oil. The other way to tell is just to take a little piece of food and throw it in and see if it sizzles. Not quite yet. Oh, there it goes. It's going. Okay, so once again, I've got my aromatics. In this case, ginger, garlic, jalapeno, chili, and onion. So let me go ahead and throw in my onions and my chilies. And my aromatics, which are gorgeous. This is about 1-inch knob of ginger, and it's about 4 cloves of garlic. The next thing, I want to add a fair amount of salt. This is about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And I like to use the kosher salt. I think it has better flavor. It just tends to work a little bit better for me. And I'm just going to move around these aromatics. I really want to be careful not to burn my aromatics. I just want to get them lightly golden. And the beauty of using a wok, let me just say, is that you've got this great center, but you've got these sides. So when you're done with your food being cooked, you can always push it up on the side and start fresh here again. So that's the reason I'm using this wok. It's just a great tool to get everything cooked really well. And now I can smell all of that rich ginger and garlic. It's emanating. It's just beautiful. Be careful of the jalapeno if you have people in your house that are somewhat sensitive to heat. You might be careful and not use a whole jalapeno, but rather maybe 1/4 of a jalapeno to a half. It does seem to really be quite hot when you use a whole one. So I'm just wanting to give you a little warning. Now I'm going to I'm softening everything up, and I'm going to throw the rest of my veg in. In this case, it is some cabbage. Just going to break that up with my hands a little bit. And mushrooms. We really want to get all of the water out of the mushrooms. Tiny bit more salt. And now I'm going to stir fry a little bit. And I want to kind of show you about using water instead of oil. So what I would do is take a tiny bit of water, and this actually creates steam, and steam is a great way to actually cook your food. You don't want too much, otherwise it won't be steam, it'll just be a big mess. But if you can see all of that steam coming through, this is a great way to stir fry your veg without using any oil. You could start with a tiny bit, but you really don't need to use any. And when I see that the steam has left the pan and that there isn't any more steam coming from the veg, I can add just a little bit more. It's really important to add just little bits of steam at a time. Number one, too much water would take away from what we're trying to do. We're trying to soften our vegetables by getting them to lose their water, by cooking them down and actually having them render their water out. So if I add too much water, I'm defeating my purpose. The second thing is that I want it to steam. I don't want it to boil. So I just want to give it just tiny little drops so it really just steams up. There we go. You can hear it. It sounds like a sauna going on in your wok. So I've got these almost soft enough. Still steaming them. And by the way, I also want to point out a couple things. I always cook on high heat with a stir fry. I feel that you can coordinate the heat really easily by pulling it off and putting it back on if you need to. But that stir frying at high is really ideal to get it very fast and cook quickly. It's not my intention to get everything to be soft and fully cooked either. I like a little bit of crunch in my vegetables. So as long as the cabbage has softened up enough, I'm okay with the rest of it. And I'm almost done. A little bit more steam to get out of here. And the next thing we're going to do is actually add our hoisin and then put in our vermicelli noodles. A couple things about vermicelli noodles. The first thing is they're quite long. So you don't want someone to eat a spring roll and have a long noodle coming out. So you have to really cut your noodles after you soak them. In terms of soaking them, let me grab my noodles that we're soaking. You can get a little close-up of this. Let me go ahead and wash this off for a sec so I can give it a little stir. And this is what they look like when they're softened. They break up from their normal form. And all I would do really is strain them and then hit them with cold water so they stop cooking. You can use any type of strainer. I like to use something like this. And then I just let cold water run through. So first, give me a little stir. And I'll take this off the heat so I don't overcook it. And I'm going to go ahead and cut my noodles. These are relatively long. Just go ahead and cut these a little bit. Go one way and then the other. And now I'm going to gather and go ahead and throw them in. And I'm also going to throw in my hoisin. This is a wonderful bean paste that gives such great flavor. You don't need a lot of it, but just a little bit to give those rice vermicelli noodles some flavor. And then you want to toss this really well to combine it. And the last thing you really should do is let them dry out. Essentially, there's going to be some water that leaches out when this food cools. And the water is really not good for rolling egg rolls. You see, when you fry egg rolls, if you have something watery inside, it's going to sort of explode and make the egg rolls open up. And we want to avoid that. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this on a sheet pan, and then we're going to go ahead and put it in the fridge for about 30 minutes and just let the steam come out of it and let it dry up, so to speak. So I'm going to take out some filling that I already made, in which I put it on a sheet pan and I dried it out for a couple hours. And I'm going to roll with this as a demo, but I just wanted you to know where this came from and how to go about it. Also, this is a time to season it, taste it. Does it need anything? Do you want to add some sriracha or any hot oil? Do you want to add, or hot sauce? Do you want to add more ginger or garlic? I mean, this is, or more salt and pepper. This is a time to really doctor it up. In terms of actually frying these, we're going to do not a deep fry, but more of a saute. So I'm going to get my oil going over here. And meanwhile, I'm going to show you how I want to go about rolling these beautiful spring rolls. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is your stir fry can consist of anything. Anything you have around, you can use in a stir fry. So grab those veggies, even veggies you haven't used for a while, chop them up, stir fry them. And if you have some rice vermicelli, it's just, what it does is it lightens up the actual egg roll. It really just, you don't have to use this. This is a very Thai adaptation to egg rolls, but I just love the fact that they lighten the egg roll up and it's not just vegetables. Also, if you eat meat, you can throw in some ground chicken or ground pork or any type of meat. I wouldn't use something like steak or big chunks of chicken because these are very delicate and you bite into them and it might be awkward to have big pieces. So now I am going to just clear this out of my way and start the rolling process. I have over here just one egg that I beat very lightly, so it's smooth, even. And I'm just going to go ahead and take out one of my wrappers while I turn on my oil so I can get everything going at the same time. Good. If you'll notice, in addition to the oil, I have just a little bit of paper towel to drain. So that's a good thing to have. Okay, so the next thing, the wrappers. These I love. These are harder to come by than other wrappers. The typical ones at most places are the egg roll wrappers, which are much thicker. These ones you can only find in a real Asian market. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a rag and I'm going to wet it with cold water lightly, squeeze it out completely, and keep these wrappers lightly covered, because if I don't cover them, what happens is they dry out really quickly. So now you have to be very careful when you pull these apart because they really stick together. This looks like a couple. There we go. Cover this up. And take one of these. they're pretty elastic. They don't rip very easily, so that's a good thing. And we're gonna put this in a sort of a diamond shape facing me. And then I'm gonna take a little bit of this egg wash and I'm just gonna put a little bit on the bottom part of the diamond, or the bottom part of this triangle. The next thing I wanna do is take a little bit of the filling, and I'm gonna make it sort of like a cigar. I'm gonna wrap it like this. I also want to, when I pick this up and start rolling it, I really want to push this food up against this edge so that it really is tight, and then I go ahead and roll it tight, tight, tight halfway, at which point I fold in and I fold in. This sort of looks like an envelope fold, and then I'm going to go ahead and go up, oopsie, and then roll, 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 roll. We also want to let this sit. This is the seam. We want to let it sit seam side down so it actually adheres. So let's try that again. The other thing, if I have time, I wanted to suggest to you is other kinds of fillings that you could use. For example, you could have leftover sausages or leftover ground beef, and you could certainly mix that with veggies, peppers, onions, ginger, garlic, whatever you have around, and stuff that with these. If you wanted to do something sweet and you had leftover fruit, for example, bananas, you could certainly roll a banana in here with some cinnamon sugar, and you could have a sweet pastry. Okay, so once again, about, I'd say, a tablespoon or two, and then go ahead, cigar shape, and then go ahead and push up against and roll, 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 roll till you're halfway, at which point you push the two little corners in, and then make sure you get it on the tip. The tip is what sometimes doesn't want to stick, because that's the first thing to dry out. So we're going to go ahead and roll this up until the seam is down, and then place that seam down. Now this isn't exactly the same size. That's not a worry for me. What's more concerning to me is, in order for this to be successfully fried, it has to be rolled tightly. If it is not rolled tightly and there are any air holes or pockets where the food can get out, it will get into your oil, and actually it'll just ruin your oil, and the egg roll will just disintegrate into the oil. So the most important thing is we wrap these really well, and that we keep them covered at all times, because they really dry out quickly. Okay, so let's go ahead, a little bit more. So we're gonna do the bottom half first. Also, try not to use too much egg. Use enough egg so that you have a good bit of glue there, but don't use so much that it turns into a big soggy mess. Okay. So I'm pushing up. I'm really holding my two fingers and pushing up against this wall, and then putting it down and folding, 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 going in, and then of course the top. And it doesn't take that long to do these. Let me do one more, just to make sure you've got it. So, like this. By the way, the last time I spoke, we made sesame soy ginger dipping sauce for our scallion pancakes. That is wonderful with these egg rolls or spring rolls. Wonderful, wonderful. Also, hoisin and sriracha sauce are great. You can make up your own dipping sauce if you wanted to. You could make a cilantro or mint dipping sauce, or a plum sauce. Go ahead and roll, 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 roll. Seam side down, okay? So I'm gonna stop there and start frying them, just so I can give you a demo of how to do that. When I fry, I always use tongs. It's just way easier. I also wanna make sure that this is hot enough. So what I'm gonna do is just take a tiny piece of this pastry dough and throw it in to make sure it bubbles immediately. That will tell me if it's done. Yep, the oil's perfect. Now I don't want to in any way splash or hurt myself, so when I do this, I'm going to just gently place them in. The other thing about frying is you don't want to put too many things into your hot oil. This is cold and this is hot. Too many cold things will lower the temperature of your oil and you won't get a good fry. So you want to be really careful to only do a few pieces at a time. Also, keep an eye out for it because these things turn brown very, very quickly. And we've already cooked our filling. We're not here to cook this. We're rather here to get the wonderful pastry skins just brown, golden brown, and crispy, okay? So once again, I'm gonna add one more. And if you notice, you'll see those bubbles forming around, which is the steam that's leaving the food. And that's actually the perfect situation you can ask for when you fry food. Another way to tell if it's time to turn them around is you can actually see a little bit of golden brown around the edges. It's a little harder with something like this, but just keep an eye out for just a light golden brown. We don't want them too dark. Now some people would prefer to actually do less oil. They worry that this is too much oil. That's fine. You can totally get this brown and crispy with less oil. Just allow yourself to replenish after a few of these, because if you have less oil, you'll run out of the oil and then you'll just be sort of burning them. So make sure that you replenish the oil as often as you see it needs. So I'm getting some good, really nice golden brown color here. And I think I can take this out at this point. Let them drip a little bit before you put them on the towel. That way your towel doesn't get too greasy. Okay, I'm going to do my last one, and then I'm going to do one that's sweet, just for fun. So the next thing, I had mentioned the banana, so I want to try the banana with you guys. So I've got a good ripe banana, delicious, and I've got cinnamon sugar. And let me just check on this, because I don't want to let it go too quickly. Also, this is on a high. I'm going to actually turn it down to more of a medium, so like a 6 or a 7. Let's say a 7. I don't want it to stay on a high. It's going to get too hot. So I'm just going to let it cool down a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so let's try this newfangled one with a banana. I came up with this idea when I had spring roll pastries, bananas, and sugar, cinnamon sugar, and I wanted dessert. So we've got a perfectly ripe banana. I'm just going to cut this in half. And then I'm going to cut it into quarters. And then I'm going to sprinkle cinnamon sugar on the banana. If you had chocolate chips, I bet they'd be delicious with this. And I think you could play around with lots of different types of fruit. I'm always looking for new ways to cook fruit. Turn this over so every side gets covered. Okay, good. Now we will roll. I'm going to separate this. Be careful that you don't assume that it's just one wrapper as opposed to a couple. The way you know is, actually you can kind of look at it. They've kind of placed them in such a way that the edges don't totally match up, so you can kind of see that one overlaps the other. The other thing is that it should be completely see-through. It shouldn't be opaque. This is a little more opaque. This is really see-through, so I can really tell that that's perfect. I'm also going to roll a little bit forward here so I don't get sugar on my wrap. So I've got the bottom half to do. Beautiful. And my banana. I think I'll do a cut banana. I think that's a little bit easier to form it. Perfect. So once again, pushing down, rolling, folding in, and then making sure you have ample for the top. And roll, 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 roll. And then store it seam side down. Let's try that again. And I probably should have covered this. It's already drying out, but that's okay. I have enough time. There we go. See, they're very, very elastic. If you rip one, like I just did, don't worry about it. Just roll that up. That is okay. No one needs to see it because it's going to be rolled. So let's see where the rip is. The rip is there, so I'll keep that on the top. So go ahead, add your glue or your egg wash in this case. I think I'll go ahead and cut these, make it easier. I have a couple pieces. And I'm going to do it as tight as possible, tight, 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 halfway up. Then fold in, and once again, egg wash. And then very carefully, just roll it together. There you go. Seam side down, okay? Once again, let's do one more. Actually, I should probably do two more because I have more banana. Okay, and okay, let's go ahead. Roll, 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 halfway up, in, like an envelope. And then let's do this part. And there we go. Okay, the next thing, I think I'll just go ahead and start frying them because I think you get the picture. Given that this oil is super hot now, I'm going to work really quickly, and it's okay to put 3 in at a time because it'll actually help me by lowering the oil. Nice. Perfect. And these are just going to take seconds. Almost there. Perfect. This is perfect. You just want to check on both sides, make sure they're both equally golden, and that's it. So I'm just going to move this heat, the hot oil off so it can cool down before I get rid of the oil. But this is really a great appetizer and a great vehicle for all your leftovers. So welcome to Hey Jude, What's Cooking? I hope you learned something interesting, and I hope you experiment and make interesting concoctions out of these spring rolls. And until next time, bon appetit.